We are going to, today, we're going to go over some setup recommendations for Respondus based on what we've read, what we've looked into. We've also got some handouts that we'll share with you all that kind of walk you through it as well. And I'm going to go into my example course here. So, you know, if you haven't already seen how to get to Lockdown Browser and Respondus, you'll click on your course. And on the left-hand side will probably near the bottom will be a thing that says Lockdown Browser. Now, a question that somebody has asked quite a few times that we just wanted to clear up is that this is optional for you to use. Some professors are really wanting to use this to kind of monitor the remote testing, but it's up to you and the type of test that you're giving. For me and the grad class I teach, this is not something that I would use for that particular class. Same thing, my Lipscomb Experience class, this is not something I would use, but I know some of you all with the types of tests that you give, this will be really beneficial for you to kind of help with academic integrity for your courses. Now, when you get into Lockdown Browser, you'll have kind of this screen. We highly recommend that you take a look at these video tutorials, the getting started information, and if you click on that, you know, it'll kind of walk you through, which will I'll have Julia kind of share about the classic and new quizzes on some tips and the practice quiz as well, and then some additional resources available for you. But I'm going to go ahead and click continue to Lockdown Browser so we can get into the settings that you will be setting up. So what you're going to do is you're going to set up your quiz in Canvas first, your quiz or exam. So you'll set up the settings, you'll set up the time limits, the types of questions, everything that you typically set up in Canvas, you'll do that first. And then you'll actually click on your quiz in Lockdown to figure out the settings that you're wanting. So the first thing you're going to do, okay, do you want Respondus Lockdown Browser or not? Or I'm like, yes. I don't know why I would come to here if I wasn't sure that I necessarily wanted that. You'll see this. So it requires. So the very first setting that it says is require Lockdown Browser to view feedback and results. The very first recommendation we have is for you to uncheck this, because if you keep it on there, then for some reason, students are not able to, like in Canvas, if you have the setting for students to immediately view their results after they complete the quiz, they're not able to see that if it's checked. So the very first recommendation we have is to uncheck this one right here, which will automatically be checked there. Also, I usually kind of delete this out because we're going through Canvas. For the most part, you're not going to need a password of some sort. That's optional, up to you if you want one. It may come into play on something else in a few minutes that we'll get to. But, you know, they're having to log in through Canvas, which is secure already through their browser. So having an additional password isn't necessary for students to have. If you do set up that password, you do need to communicate with students before the test what that access code is for them to be able to get in there, or they're not going to be able to get in there. Like I said, it may impact the Respondus Monitor setting, which we'll get to in a few minutes. And then the advanced settings. So the advanced settings, the ones that we recommend from the CTL, we recommend that allow the students to take this exam with an iPad. We may have some students who have iPads. We're looking into, we have been added into kind of a beta version of Chromebook and using Chrome books for that. So I'm looking into that this week. With me being on vacation last week, I didn't get a chance to look into it. So that may also pop up here, we'll see, and we'll follow up with the information on that. allow access to specific external web domains. We recommend that you put this if you are having students go to specific websites, because if not, they're not going to be able to access those websites because they're completely locked into that Canvas browser. So if there are some additional websites that students need, you'll need to mark that there. And it's great because there is that little explanation beside each of these as well. If you require students to have a calculator as well, you'll need to check that calculator. And it could be a standard calculator, or we've got some scientists here, some scientific calculator that you might need as well. So make sure that you select that. Those are the ones that we recommend. Now, the ones that we do not recommend, first of all, I'm just going to uncheck these for the purpose. This one right here, lock students into the browser until exam is completed. We do not recommend that you check that because it will prevent students from exiting the browser until the exam is completed. So if there is an emergency, there's a Wi-Fi shortage, a power outage, something like that, then it's going to impact students and they're able to get back in to finish the exam. So it will automatically, if students go to exit the exam, they have to verbally say in the exam, it'll prompt them to verbally say why they are leaving the exam. Ruth, question.
I thought that was the purpose of lockdown browser, so they couldn't leave the browser.
Well, this is talking about the entire exam. So like if all of a sudden the internet goes out, and that is checked, then the students can't get back in there to finish the exam at all. You have to go into Canvas and give them another attempt. So it's still locked down, but if they're like, and especially because we have been having some Wi-Fi issues on campus, this is a recommendation that we recommend that, yeah. So they're still gonna be locked down, but if something happens and there's a power outage or like, oh my goodness, we have to exit our dorm room right now. Like, they're evacuating our dorm or something, like, who knows? So we do not recommend. The other one, which I don't know why some people we don't recommend the enable printing from the toolbar because they're able to print the exam. So I'm not sure why. And the reason why, like for this one, if it's a student who has an accessibility or an accommodation, they're going to be going through the accessibility office for their exam. You would be giving them a copy of the exam, and they would have their secure test, testing center location. So we do not recommend that you select the enable printing from the toolbar. So once again, just a reminder that we do not recommend this setting because it will not allow them to see their feedback in Canvas. We recommend not doing an access code unless there's some other situation which we'll talk about, because they're already signing in through the secure Canvas browser. And then the ones that we do recommend under advanced settings is allow students to take the exam with an iPad, allowing the specific web domains if you're having them. Now, if you're not having them go into any other websites, then you don't have to mark that one. And then same thing with the calculator. The ones that we do not recommend is this one, the lock students, because if you lock, like I said, if there's a power outage, Wi-Fi outage, something like that, they can't get back in there. And then enable printing from the toolbar. Other questions on kind of these initial lockdown browser settings?
I just had one question about the other URLs that we allow them to go to. Is it kind of, you provide an umbrella URL, or it has to be the exact page for each one they're going to? Meaning if they access a digital textbook, would it be the URL for the textbook or the URL for each specific page? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a really good question that Julia.
It's the domain.
Okay.
So, if you've got pearson.com/ and whatever, like science 101 or whatever, and that's this goes to specifically to the whole textbook, and that's what you want them to do, then that's just what you put in there. So I wouldn't put the individual pages.
Okay, thank you.
So that's an important point, because if you
Yes.
allow that, you're allowing them access to everything in that text.
Mhm.
And you just have to know that if you're going to allow them to go
Yeah.
there.
That's okay for my purposes, but thank you for that clarification.
Another point, which Julie, I realized, like for the tips for instructors, I'm not sure if this was on there or not, that I got out of the webinar the first webinar I attended on Respondus, was that you can also link in specific questions in Canvas if there's a specific like resource within Canvas, like a PDF resource that you want them to access in Canvas. You can link on the actual exam question as well, which I thought was a really good, helpful tip as well, which Julia, that just hit me as we were talking about this. See, we're co-learners on Respondus with you all, so we're learning as we go along as well. So that is just for the lockdown browser settings and the recommendations and that we have available. Now let's go into the Respondus Monitor if you have a webcam. There are two options. Now, some people just do the lockdown, which is perfectly fine. However, you won't be able to see the students. You won't be able to know, like, are they talking to anybody else? And so you know, a couple of options. So the first option is to require the Respondus Monitor for this exam. Okay, it's an add-on. Okay, great. I'm going to continue on. And let's take a look at the startup sequence. What is really good is that you can kind of preview and see, what the students see as well. So you're able to kind of preview what the students see. Now, the one that we really recommend that you focus a lot of attention on are the additional instructions one, where you'll be able to see what it specifically says. But this is where if you are allowing students to have like scratch paper, their own calculator, their textbook, anything like this, this is where you're going to want to include that additional information. So you can edit that information and add the specifics that you need. So this is just like what Respondus has, and it's really good stuff. However, and it says like, if an interruption occurs, explain what happened by speaking directly into the webcam, because the AI monitors will kind of flag it. And you're able just to go to that particular clip and view kind of what happened. Like if somebody walked by in the, behind. So you're able to give those specifics. But like I said, if you are giving them some things of like, oh, you need to be able to, you are allowed to use scratch paper or hold up, when you do your environment check, hold up your information so that, or the sheet of paper, so I can see that you have it. And then we really recommend that you keep most of these on here. It's very thorough. The student photo, so have the students have their Lipscomb ID with them as they are getting ready to take the exam. And then you can add, like we've changed this to hold your Lipscomb identification card that we've kind of set up at the kind of admin level, so that way students know to have that. And then the environment check, this is where you can add in, make sure you only have 2 pieces of scratch paper or something like that, and the information that you're wanting them to be able to see, because you can go back in and take a look at that as well. The other ones on here, so that's the startup sequence. And then just take a look at the text and edit it to fit your particular test. It's going to look different for everyone, because Ruth could say you have nothing else, and Brian might say you're allowed 2 pieces of scratch paper. So, be able to have the specifics that you need for your exam. The facial detection options. Now, Joseph, this goes into your question that you asked earlier. So the prevent students from starting an exam if face cannot be detected. We recommend that you keep this one. That way you can make sure that it's the student taking the exam. This one right here, this notify students during the exam if face cannot be detected. If you are allowing students to use additional resources like scratch paper or a book, you may want to uncheck this one, because if they are looking down, it's just going to come up on their screen that we need to do a facial detection, and they're going to totally miss that. And then it's going to flag all of these things that you're going to have to go in and review. So, you know, if you're going to have them use additional resources, then I would uncheck that one. Now, if you don't have any additional resources that you're going to be using, then go ahead and keep that checked, because it will kind of prompt the students and then they should be able to see. Any questions about the startup sequence facial detection options?
Sorry, one quick one. So the notes on the Respondus, we still have the normal notes on our Canvas quiz, right? So if we had put the directions typically there, they'll still be able to view those.
Absolutely. Yep. Yes. But this is going through that kind of that startup sequence of students, you know, reminding them of the specific things since they will be using Respondus. Great question, Joseph. Ruth.
If that facial detection options, you've got those two checked, but you don't have facial detection checked.
That's because I can't do anything. It's an automatic that if I'm using Respondus, I can't make any of those changes. If I'm using the Respondus Monitor, so this is an automatic from Respondus. So I can't go in. I'm trying, can't do anything.
It's automatically checked.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Good question. Great question. All right. And then advanced settings. So this one right here, this allow another application to use the microphone during the exam. We only recommend that one because with Respondus, only one application can access the microphone at a time. But if your exam question may have an audio response, I'm thinking of like foreign language where you might have you know, something like that, then you might allow another application to use the microphone. But typically you're just going to leave that unchecked unless you have some type of audio response exam question of some sort. And then this make webcam videos additionally available. This is like if you're using like the Canvas teacher app and you want to be able to see like the little webcam videos after the results, then you can check that to be able to view that on your mobile device. But if you're just going to use your browser, then I wouldn't worry about checking that as well. So that, you know, that's something optional. And then this enter a demo student username is really not for us using Canvas. This is mainly for other LMSs that people use with Respondus, where you can do like a true test student with a log username and password. We don't have that through our Canvas. You know, we have a test student, but that test student doesn't really have a login information. So that is something that we can just ignore as well. So once, you know, I figured out the monitor webcam settings I want, I can click save and close. So here's the other piece on the exam. So if I did, okay, we're just pretending here. If the other option would be either Respondus Monitor or a proctored lab can be used to take this exam. You might select this option if you are having half of the students physically in your classroom taking the exam and students who are taking the exam remotely. And with that, if you're doing that option, then you will need an access code for those students who are taking the class remotely. So we could do, go Bisons, you know. And I would need to, all of my students who are taking it, you know, or, well, no, this, never mind. I was wrong there. You'll need that because when the students are physically in the classroom, or even those who are remote, it'll prompt them and say, do you have an access code to take the exam? And that's when you set up and you tell the students what that access code is in the classroom. If the students say no, they don't have an access code, then it will automatically take them through this webcam check and make them go through all of those pieces. But if you're not, you know, if you're the one monitoring the students physically in the classroom, then you can just give them that exam. It's not going to do the webcam startup, any of that for them. It's just going to kind of have them in lockdown browser. You're kind of the person kind of monitoring it. But those who are remote, they'll have to go through the webcam sequence there. So this is when the password is beneficial, and that's something for you to give those students who may be physically in the classroom with you taking the exam. So, you know, this is a great option if you've decided that you're going to go, you're cohorting and you're just going to stick with the same schedule, and instead of everyone taking the exam remotely, you're just going to have some in the classroom physically and some remote, then you can select this either Respondus Monitor or a proctored lab. So and it prompts you. I love this because it does prompt you that you will need an access code there. So those are kind of the recommendations for setup that we have. And like I said, we have a nice little handout that will walk you through each of these as well, that we will share with all of you all, that you can access as well. So just as a little reminder, you know, we like to do our little help documents that walk you through all of these as well. And we'll have the recording available. Any other questions about the kind of some of the setup pieces before we get into some of the tips?
One about the microphone. Okay, so typically what I had done would be have them join a Zoom call while they're taking the exam via Canvas. So if I was going to do that, I would need that box checked to allow another application to use a microphone. Is that correct?
You would, this is a good question, and it's something to try. You would need that checked. You would also need to add that link, the Zoom link, into the advanced settings of being able to access the external web domain, because they're not going to be able to go to that Zoom call.
So it's really just adding a layer of complexity. I might as well just use the Respondus Monitor.
That's what I would recommend. You know, I know some people are like trying to figure out like how to provide help, like if students have questions during an exam. So, because I've had some people ask me about like, well, can I be on a Zoom link if students have questions that they need to ask? The other thing would be like, if you could, like, you know, the Canvas chat, being able to have that link as well for them to be able to access, just to type in questions that may not be a microphone.
So that's a good point. We can't communicate to them through Respondus.
No, because they're locked in. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, I asked them about other applications running, and it locks down other applications. Kind of depends on how it views Zoom, whether it sees it as a separate application or not.
Right, and that's like you said, you can allow other web domains to be accessed as well. Mm-hmm.
But that's a subtle difference. I mean, you know, our Zoom that we run is actually not a web from a web. It's an application we run through the web, but I think you need to ask Respondus about that one.
Yeah, most of it is probably you're not going to be able to use Zoom. Like I said, I think being able to, you know, figure out another way, like if there's a, you know, some type of like Google form or something like that, or some way that, you know, but students are locked in. So that's a downside of using like if you're all remote and not being able to provide that access, you know, to be able to answer questions right away as well. So that's something to consider as you're setting it up as well. All right, so Julia, let's talk a little bit about some tips. I can share my screen if you want.
Sure.
I have it up.
Okay, so the biggest thing about this is knowing, because it's new for us, it's new for the students, there's always a learning curve. So it's really important to give your students and yourself enough time to get acclimated. This works with Canvas quizzes. So you have to set up your Canvas quiz first. Then you apply the settings in Respondus. So you want to make sure that you have a good working knowledge of Canvas quizzes. You need to know whether or not you're using Canvas classic quizzes or new quizzes. So Canvas classic quizzes are typically what we think of with Canvas quizzes. If what you've done is gone into your Canvas course and simply clicked on quizzes on the link in the course menu, then you're in classic quizzes. In order to use new quizzes, you actually have to turn that on in your settings. So if you haven't turned that on, then you're still using classic quizzes. So to turn new quizzes on, you would go to the settings that's typically at the bottom in the course menu, and then you would go to those feature options and you would click to turn that on, and you see that on the screen there. So that in order to use new quizzes, that's what you have to do. So new quizzes, somebody asked me, what's the difference, right? Well, new quizzes actually gives you other choices of question types you can put in there. Some things like drag and drop and hotspot type of questions are available through new quizzes. Also, I've come across the fact that, let's say you have a student and their Wi-Fi goes out in the middle of taking the quiz. In classic quizzes, you can't just open that back up for them to pick up where they were. Unfortunately, in classic quizzes, it actually requires you to add an additional attempt for them to be able to get back in and do the test. In new quizzes, it allows them, there's an option for you to open it and allow them to complete the attempt they were in the middle of. So that's another big difference between the two. If you've already created your quiz without turning on new quizzes, once you turn on new quizzes, it's not that it's going to convert all your existing quizzes. It won't. So you have to set up the quiz in the new quiz engine. When you have new quizzes turned on and you start creating a quiz, it's going to ask you, or do you want to use new, which engine do you want to use, classic or new? So you have to build it from the start that way. Hope, do you want to say anything more about that?
No, I think that's it. And I learned something new too. I didn't know that about classic versus new quizzes, about letting them start from where they were. So, and there's nothing wrong with the classic quizzes. Like if that's what you've been using, it's just that the new quizzes, Canvas does some beta testing a lot of times before they launch a new feature completely. And that's what they're doing with new quizzes, where there are those additional question types.
Yeah. So going back up on the page on number 4, I just want to mention the fact that one of the things that you need to be sure to do is communicate well with your students about how they're going to be able to access their test using this. So one of the things that we recommend is that you communicate out to your students what those system requirements are. And as of right now, it does not work with Chromebooks. So it's important to know that here on campus, students do, if they have a Chromebook, they do have the option of going to the library. So the Mac or the Apple computers that are in the library all have Lockdown Browser and Respondus Monitor loaded on them. So the students can do their test on one of those computers. So that's important to know. Do you want to say anything more about that, Hope?
Now, we also are working on getting the iPads available in the library where students can check them out for 7 days, but IT's still working on that. There's the bigger issue, I think, with the iPads going on that they're trying to solve as well. So,
yes. Yes. So another piece of this is we have a Lipscomb specific link for students to use to download Lockdown Browser onto their device. And it's important that we communicate that link to them. They're not going to be able to Google Lockdown Browser and get to the link because it's not on the Respondus website. So you have to be able to provide that to them so they know how to download that software. Also important is letting your students know how they're going to access the quiz. If your test is built with classic quizzes, they have to start the Lockdown Browser first and then log into Canvas and go to your quiz that way in order for it to work. If they start a regular browser like Google, it's going to put them in an infinite loop kind of thing. And it is eventually going to tell them you have to download Lockdown Browser. And if they already have it downloaded, sometimes they get confused by that. So if they get that message, just know they haven't actually started from the Lockdown Browser and you've got a classic quiz. If you're someone who's used the new quiz engine to build your test in Canvas, then you can just go in the students can just go in the regular way, regular Google, go to your quiz, and once they go into their quiz to start it, it's going to launch Lockdown Browser for them. So there's a slight difference in how they access the test based upon which quiz engine you're using to build your test in Canvas. I think this might be a good place to pause to see if there are any questions about that.
They had mentioned in the Respondus training that typically when they open the first quiz, it'll bring them to a link to download the software. But it sounds like the way that you're describing it, they need to have it downloaded before they go into the Canvas quizzes. Is that correct?
So it does come up with that page for them to download the Lockdown Browser. But what confuses students with that, and this is just from people trying to use this over the last couple of weeks that we've learned this, what confuses students is they feel like they've already downloaded it. So then they're like, oh, this is not working. So I think it's just a matter of the student becoming confused at that point, as opposed to, yes, it is gonna provide them the link to download it. But if they've already got it loaded on their computer, that link does not automatically start it. Does that make sense?
yeah, because they have to start that browser, the Lockdown Browser, and then go into Canvas, which is where, and like Julia said, we've seen this loop happen with students and they can't get out of it, even though they're like, well, I already downloaded it, and they re-download it and they're like, it's still not working. Well, it's not working because you went to the Lockdown Browser and started from your computer and accessing that way.
So one of the biggest things that we just want to encourage you, biggest tip from us is do a practice quiz with your students. The Respondus company recommends that this take at least 5 minutes of their time to be able to complete. So one idea is to have a copy of the honor code there and then ask questions based upon the honor code and maybe how does that apply to when you're taking a test online. Asking questions like that, just to give them the experience of going in and being in a quiz, a test for at least 5 minutes. The suggestion is that this be very low stakes so that students don't get really anxious about just the practice quiz. The idea behind the practice quiz is so that they see how it all works and they can ask any questions, and you can help work through any issues with the students actually prior to the test itself.
Yeah, and I recommend that you do that in enough time between, like, before your actual first exam or test or quiz that you're giving, that counts. So that way you can troubleshoot any issues. So, you know, don't just do it the day before, you know, do it several days before, like a week or so, you know, or a couple of days before. We've had some,
I'll tell you, sorry, Hope.
I was gonna say, go ahead.
I'll just tell you, I actually got an email this morning from somebody who did that practice quiz with their students last week ahead of a test this week, and had a student trying to access it on their iPad and ran into an issue that IT is having to help them with to determine, is it a situation where the iPad is not on the right operating system? You know, there could be any number of issues that occur with that. So it's just really helpful to have that time in between, if possible, so that that troubleshooting can occur. And I will tell you, our IT department has just been really on it, trying to help students as much as they can with this. We had a situation last week where they just really pitched in, and the day of, the students were still having difficulty, but they got them to where they needed to be able to access their test by time of the test. And so they're working really, really hard to try to support all of us with this.
Yeah, we've had some professors who kind of launch the practice test like within a class setting. So that way they could say, all right, I'm opening it right now. I'm here. If there are any remote students, you know, you can be able to, you know, ask any questions about downloading as well. So I'll be in the Zoom room, you know, for that. So recommend that. Yeah. Yeah, highly recommend that practice. And we're going to work on also kind of building out kind of an honor code one that if you wanted to use as well, you could use that. But that's added to the list that we just haven't gotten to that point yet. But this week, it's on the list for this week. So. And then we are also something to share with students. Julia, you want to?
Sure. So yeah, we were just talking about how important it is to communicate things to students. So what we have done is we've created this tips for students document, trying to help you guys with that. So this walks the students through, make sure your digital device is ready. Here are the system requirements for your device. You'll need to access to a webcam to use Respondus Monitor. And then it lets students know if you don't have access to one of the systems listed above, then the library does have those computers. Use the Lipscomb specific link, and that's provided to them right there. Make sure you know how to get started with your quiz. Your professor will give you specific instructions on that. Take the test in an area that's free of distractions. That's really super important. When you do Respondus Monitor, if a cat walks behind it, it's going to flag them. They want to be in a setting to where it's quiet and, you know, there's not other beings, people and other beings around, if at all possible. There'll be specific instructions as you get started. If using Respondus Monitor, read through all those instructions carefully. If you have any technical problems, the company does, while they're taking a test, the company has a link right there in the lockdown browser to a 24/7 live chat for help with the company. So they can take advantage of that if they need it. And then also just reminding the students that the IT help desk is there to help them as well. So this just kind of helps to put together in one document some of those things that we mentioned would be really important to communicate to the students.
And is that document the same that's on when they go into lockdown browser? Is all that there already? or something
No,
you give them separately?
no, this is, go ahead, Julia.
No, I was just going to say a good bit of this, the majority of this is what they need to know before they even get to the lockdown browser. So it needs to be communicated before that time.
Yeah, and we added some specific things on here about like, you know, you may need to start and then navigate to Canvas, and some of them may not know the specific Lipscomb Canvas login information as well. So, yeah. Anyway, but we want to create another resource for you.
So where do we get that document then?
Then we're going to share that with you. Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to work on emailing all of you all these documents and accessing it as soon as our session's over today, and a copy of this recording as well for you. It may be later today before the recording, because we have another CTL session at 12, but we'll get all of these to you today.
I have a question. Once they download the Respondus using the browser you've given us here, they don't have to do that again. They're done. So every time they get into quizzes, from that point on, they'll just get a prompt and they'll click on it and it'll put it on there. Is that correct? They download it once originally, and then they don't have to worry about that anymore. When they get into quizzes, there'll be something that pops up and they'll just click on it and it will work. Is that correct?
Not exactly. So, okay, what happens is they download it and they install it on their computer. Okay, that point they don't have to download it again. Okay, however, they have to know if you're using Canvas Classic quizzes for your test, they have to know to open that lockdown browser. So they have to find where it is on their computer, and they have to open it and then log into Canvas and go to your quiz.
And once they've done that, like for one class, they're going to know kind of the system, you know, because we're all using it now. So we've run into that with, you know, some of them using it. So because one professor set up quizzes, but then half of them didn't take the practice quiz, and he was a little frustrated. And I said, well, they probably didn't take it if they've used it in another class. So if you want them to really take it, you know, send them an email and it's like, you know, this is a requirement for my class, is for you to take this practice quiz. So
Hope too, the other thing they could do is they wouldn't, you know, if you wanted to set it and absolutely make sure that they've done that practice quiz first, then let them know you're not going to be able to get into your test until you do that practice quiz. And then you can set it to where the test is not available to them until they've completed the practice quiz.
yes, yeah, in Canvas you can set up the, you know, your modules, and the way that you organize it is that they can't access the actual test until they take the practice, which is great. Another layer.
I would say that if you're going to do that, communication with the students on this is key anyway, but that it really is going to be key if you're going to do it that way. So they understand they have to do that practice quiz first.
Yeah.
So everybody that's used it so far, it's been smooth. Like the last one was a nightmare. And I don't want to create a nightmare for 50 students trying to take an online class. What was the other one we had?
Honor lock.
Oh yeah, that just, it was so, then I ended up, it just didn't work.
I would say that there have been some bumps already, but most of it is because we just haven't known enough information about Respondus and the recommendations for settings, and like a lot of it is that people have not set up a practice quiz for students. Because they just hurried up and they went ahead and set the exam, which I understand because we had been waiting on it for a while. Same thing with, they had not communicated things to students as well. about, you know, some specifics. So that's where a lot of the hiccups have come in, along with one of the you know, somebody had set up the setting and did not uncheck where the exit one. And that was when the internet was going down, it was like a Friday afternoon. And so that professor like reached out and said, you know, I have this email from a student, and I'm like, you can go back into Canvas and give them another attempt, because that was during the time when the internet was going out on campus, where it was shutting down that day. So, you know, it has, I mean, but for the most part, you know, if you set up the settings and you know, kind of communicate with your students, then it's much easier than some of the things with honor log. It's also not as invasive for students because they don't have someone live proctoring them, which is some of the pushback that we heard from a lot of students and parents in the spring.
I'll add one more thing to that. Excuse me, Nancy. So the other thing is realize our students are students, right? I had one fella in particular, we had a remote instructor who, and the student was here on campus, and he had a Chromebook, so he ended up going to the library on the computer there. And even though she told him he needed to use the Apple computer on the library, come to find out he was trying to do it on the PCs, which those don't have webcams, so we've not loaded the software on those. So, and then when I asked if he tried to start the Respondus lockdown browser first, he kept saying, yes, yes. I said, show me what you did, and he went to Google. So students may say one thing and do another. That might surprise you, I know, but not. But students are students, so there's always going to be those times where there'll be little hiccups because of a misunderstanding there.
I just know my first test, of course, I have a lot of freshmen. It's all objective. In 35 years, I've never had such high scores on my first test. And my husband said it was just because I'd gotten that much better over the years, but I'm not thinking that was the reason. So I really need to put something on there to kind of monitor what's going on.
Well, let's hope these are really good too, and then you can think you've gotten that good.
Yeah. Any other questions? I hope that this has been helpful for you to kind of look at some settings and some kind of tips that we've pulled together for you all. Like I said, this afternoon when I get the recording uploaded into YouTube, I'll send you all the resources later today. So thank you all so much for attending and joining our CTL session. So I hope that you all have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
And
Thank
Ruth's
you.
getting her steps in over.
Yeah, you see, I'm already to the sack now.
Thank you all.